All right, we are live and going. So welcome everybody to day 36 of the Rankin Technical College Online AWD1115 Database-Driven Website Development 2 class. All right, today we're going to complete the Chapter 11 Quarterly Sales App, and then we're going to get into Chapter 12, which is on how to use EF Core. Now, this is what I'm hoping that we're going to do today. We're going to finish up the quarterly sales app and get it to work. All right. Then when we get into EF Core, the chapter is kind of broken down again into two different topics. And what I mean is the first half of chapter 12 is basically theory on using EF Core. Then what they do after that is they build the bookstore website they're going to do in chapter 13, but they build it to show the concepts that are in chapter 12. So even though we've already got that, I'm planning on building that anyway. Then when we get done with that, and I don't know when that'll be, but when we get done with that, we will do the update the trips log app together for chapter 12. So hopefully we'll be able to start with the trips log app that we did back in chapter 8 and then just add to it. That's the plan at least. And then next week, again, if we can get all that done, then next week we'll begin on chapter 13. If you have not looked at chapter 13, the entire chapter is on creating this bookstore website. All right, I'm going to go in and I've created it already using their data. So what I'm going to do this weekend is pull that back and look at my own data and see if we can add that, because that's going to give us the chance to add a few more things that are not in the actual mirror. I can change a little bit of stuff around. We'll see how it goes. All right. I mentioned yesterday, and this is on me this weekend. I've got to get everything graded, meaning especially hot number 4. All right. And the chapters 8 and 9 work, that being the everything that you were assigned for 8 and 9, the written test, the labs, the homework, etc. And as it says here, then the written test, labs, and homework for chapters 10, 11, and 12 will not be due until a week from Sunday, so the 29th. All right, so with all that, then let's get going. And we left off here yesterday. So what we had done. Yes.
Sorry, you're not sharing your screen yet.
Okay. Boy, oh boy. Thank you for letting me know. All right. See it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So what we did yesterday then was we started off by, as always, going in and setting our app setting.json file. Nothing really new there. All right. Then we went to our program file and we put in basically our configuration. All right, for this as well. So we did those two things. Again, nothing new there, nothing that we haven't gone over many times before. Then we went in and in our models, we created an employee model. All right, and we put quite a few different restrictions on it. All right, whatever you want to call it, validations on it, decorators on it, whatever. All right, so we did a lot of that. Then when we got done with that, we did the same for sales or sale. All right, there wasn't as much in there, but there still was a fair amount. All right, then we went in and did our sales list view model. And as mentioned yesterday, that basically was set up. All right, that basically was set up so that we're able to kind of join these two tables together. All right. And then finally, we went in and we created our sales context. All right. I'd like to say it went smoothly, but there were bumps along the way, but hopefully at least we got that done. Then we created a validation folder. And under that validation folder, we created 3 different attribute files. The first one was the greater than attribute. And what this one did or will do will be to allow us to compare two different values, be they integers, doubles, or dates, to see if one of the values is greater than the other. As mentioned yesterday, the last else in here just returned success. What we could have done in lieu of doing that, what we could have done is we could have said, okay, let's make another one for decimal, let's make another one for Boolean, let's make another one for string, etc. But we're not using any of those in here, so we just return success. All right. And the other thing here, as it says with the error message, all right, this is going to catch the error message. So in other words, if we have discovered an error in there, it will be shown, all right, based on the code that's here. All right, and otherwise it won't. But regardless, then it's going to return the validation result with either a message that has nothing in it, all right, or that has something in it. From there, we went to the past due and kind of did the same thing. Now, the first one was comparing, all right, values to see if one was greater than the other. And this one is trying to basically compare to see if something is past the current date. All right. And I don't know if I did this yesterday, but I kind of liken this to, if you've got a library book that's due. No, that's not as big a thing anymore going to the library. It's kind of funny. My mother is 93. My oldest brother is going to be on Saturday 72 and or 71, something like that. But they still make their weekly treks to the library. Okay. But the idea, though, is that we want to check a date to see if it's less than today's date. If it is, great. If it's not, then we have put, it must put a valid past date. All right. So again, we're going to get into that in just a bit. Finally, we did this validation thing itself. All right. And as you can see, these are the things that are going to be used in conjunction with both some of the stuff we talked about with the models and some of the stuff we'll talk about with the associated controllers. So as it says right here we're checking an employee because you already heard this from yesterday. You cannot have two employees in the database with the same first name, the same last name, and the same date of birth. So we check. If we don't find a match, everything is cool. Otherwise, we're going to basically show this error message that says, hey, that person's already in the database. Then we do a different check, and this one is for manager employee match. And now looking at that, I wonder if I can do a rename on this. All right. And what that is saying then, what that is saying right there is you cannot, when you bring in a new employee, you cannot bring in an employee and make them their own manager. All right. That's just, again, the way it's set up here. And here we kind of reversed it. We said, hey, if everything is the same, all right, so if there's nothing in there for manager, if it's not null, so we put something in there, and the first name is equal to what's in the database and the last name, etc., again, cannot be the same person. All right. Then we finally, the last one we did in here was a sales check. And again, one of the things that we talked about yesterday was the fact that this is not technically a complete app, meaning that as far as the CRUD operations, we will be able to do a create in here, and we will be able to do a read in here, but we cannot update. So once you put something into the database, it's there. You also cannot do a delete. Again, once you put something into the database, it's there. So if there's already something in for an employee, for that quarter and that year using that employee's ID, you just get an error message that says, hey, that's already in the database. So again, that's where we left off yesterday. You see, we're going to have in here when we run this, we did have a certain number of warnings in there for things that could be null. One way to get around that, I was thinking about this yesterday. All right, there's probably at least something either in the employee or in the sale. All right, like for example, this, we could have put here the question mark, and that may have eliminated most of the warnings that we're getting. I'm going to just leave it the way it is and continue on from here. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to close the models and we're going to open up the controllers. Now we will have a total of 4 controllers by the time we get done. We will have the home controller, which we're going to manipulate right now. Then we will add an employee controller. Then we will add a sales controller. And then we will add a validator controller. So we will have one of each of these. The good news is once we get all that stuff done, and then we go in after doing that, after we get all that stuff done, and we go in and we start making some, I'm sorry, just got distracted. Something just flew by my window here. All right. But the point is, after we get done with the layout file, we're going to have view files, but we'll only have one view file for the home controller, one view file for and that'll be index.cshtml, one view file for the employee controller, which will allow us to add an employee, one view file for the sale controller, which will allow us to add a new sale, and we won't have anything for the validation controller. All right. And then once we get done with that, we're pretty much finished. So again, let's just get started. I'm going to bring up the home controller and see. I'm going to just close a bunch of the other stuff that's in here. All right. I know there's a close option. There's a better one than this, but that's just what I'm going to use. All right. So we've got our home controller in here. Start this off basically the way that we've been starting stuff off virtually every time we create something in here. And that is remove the diagnostics. All right. Get rid of the stuff in here for loggers. Get rid of the privacy stuff because we're not going to use that. Again, I've called that kind of thinning out our controller. So we've knocked it down to just a few lines. All right. And we are going to come in here and we are going to have an index, and our index is going to have both a post and a get. But before we do that, let's come in here, and we've done this before, typically not in the home controller, but you can. We're going to come in here with a sales context that I'm going to, again, just we'll call it context. All right. And then we're going to have, oops, sorry, not just that. We're going to have our get and set for that. All right. And then after that, we're going to have our constructor. So a public home controller. Yeah. And it's not how I want to do it, but that's fine. So let's come in here. You've seen this before. Where we basically do this. Again, there shouldn't be any surprise in there. All right. And again, what we're going to do next, we're almost halfway through with this method anyway, but we're going to do the index, and it's going to have, again, both a post and it's going to have a get. And the idea behind this is basically it's what do we want to show? All right. So let's come in here with an HTTP get to start. All right. And when we get this, again, basically the idea is we'll need an index here. And when I say an index, I should have said we need an ID here. So we'll have an int for ID. All right. But now rather than just returning a view, we're going to do more than that. All right. We want to build ourselves a sales query, and we want to know whether or not we've given this an ID to filter by. So in other words, all right, do we want to filter by a certain employee, or kind of do we want to have every employee? All right. So we're going to make this an iQueryable, and it's going to be of type sales. All right, not sales context. I think that's probably going to be sale, but let's see. And it's going to be a query. All right. And we're going to have a query in here. Oh, I got that, but I did. That's going to be equal to context dot sales. All right. And as always, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put this on multiple lines. All right. Now we have to check and see if that ID is greater than 0. If it is, then we'll do a query, because right in here right now, we're basically looking through everything. All right. But we want to do a query to just find that employee. So if the ID is greater than 0, all right, then we want to come in and say query equals query dot where, and we want to check if there is an ID rather in the database that matches the one that we passed in. All right. So that's cool. All right. We're still not done. So next, what we want to do is we want to come in here, and now we want to create an instance of our view model. So what that's doing. All right. So that's what we're going to do to start with. That's actually going to execute the query. So when you run the toList method, basically, for lack of better words, that's what that's doing. All right. So we want to do that. And again, if we want, we can put this as well on multiple lines. It's not real long. That's typically the reason I put it on multiple lines, but this isn't too bad. And finally, we will return, but what we're going to return here is going to be our view model. So let's see what these errors are. All right, so this equals, first of all, I don't have the word new in there, which screwed up a lot of things. All right, that pretty much was it. So we're creating ourselves a new sales list view model. So we want information from both the sales table and the employees table. So up here, we had basically come in and grabbed everything from the sales table. All right, then we're checking to see if we've actually passed in an ID. If we have, we're trying to filter that data down so we just find that employee. All right, and then we're setting up the view model to actually run this query right here. All right, we're also going through our list of employees, and we are filtering that, and we're filtering it by first name. All right, I don't know why they did first name, but they did. All right, that's what they told us to do on here. And then we're listing that out. So that literally is it. And what that will conceivably do is whatever employee we have listed, it will show that employee's sales. All right, so again, kind of going back to what we talked about, a little smaller. So again, when it comes up, it should look something like this. So we'll have a drop down here. And, if it's Grace Hopper, fine, whoever our first employee is, or however we set it up, but it'll have just the sales for that one employee. All right, so that's pretty much what we're working on in here right now. All right, so that is the get. All right, then we need the post. This is fairly short. It's going to be a redirect to action result. All right, it'll again be indexed, but remember, we cannot do this. Well, technically we could, all right, but it says not all paths go to value. Technically, since we are in here passing in a value, we could leave this without a parameter, but we don't want to do that. We want to make sure we're getting the right employee. All right, now we're getting the error because we haven't returned anything yet, so. All right, so if there was somebody, we're basically going to return that. I can put a space there. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to return the empty string, and that'll clear out anything that was in there. That's the idea. All right, because we want to select a different employee. So we'll do another return with a redirect to action to index. But rather than caring about an employee, we're just going to do this, new, and ID equals the empty string, like that, with a semicolon at the end. And that is our home controller. So the only thing that we're going to have to worry about, once again, for this home controller when we get to our views in a little bit, the only thing that we're going to have to worry about in that case is writing an index.cs HTML file. All right. Okay. So next, let's write the employee controller, and we don't have that. So let me quick do a file save all, and let me close our home controller. Go back into our controllers and do an add controller. It'll be an MVC empty controller, and it'll be called employee controller .cs. And there that is. All right. You know this already, or at least should know this already. And that is, again, the fact that we know that it's a controller and it's a child controller. It's a child of controller. All right. And all of the methods for the controller are defined in there. All right. In that namespace or in that area. All right. We're going to start this off just like we started off the last one, in that we're going to do a private, not a private sales context that we'll call context. And we will set up another, just like we just did, we will set up a constructor. All right. And we don't need this in there. You could put it in, it doesn't hurt. And also, please remember, if you'd rather do it that way, that this can also be rewritten using the arrow function. So just saying context equals CTX. So either one of those ways will work. I'll leave that in there just so you can see them both kind of in action, so to speak. All right. Now, let's rewrite this one too. We will have an index in there, but all we want to do is redirect to home. So again, if it's just a single line, we don't need the curlies. We don't need the word return. All right. We don't even need view here because we're going to do a redirect to action. And yes, we want to go to index and the index of our home controller. That is important to put in the home controller, because if we left that out, it would be trying to go back to the index file of the employee controller. All right. So again, we're going to have in here, just like before, we're going to have a get and we're going to have an add. So, or I should say not a get and an add, an HTTP get and an HTTP post. So let's put those in. And for the get, it's pretty simple. All right. So we will have a public iAction result, and this will be an add. So for lack of better words, this will show the information that we need in order to be able to add a new employee. All right. You already know what that is, or at least should, because we looked at this already. There's the add employee. So we will have to provide in there. All right, when we're setting it up, we will have to provide for a first name, a last name, a birth date, a hire date, and a manager. Plus, that'll give us the chance, other than first name and last name, which, as you know, are both required, that'll give us a chance to test out our validation methods. That the birth date, all right, we want to make sure, yes, as it says there, it's already in the database. All right, so we want to make sure that isn't the case. We want to make sure that the hire date, all right, we want to check and make sure that that's a valid hire date. And we want to check that the person hasn't tried to make themselves a manager. All right, so let's write that. Again, not long. We'll do a view bag dot employee equal, in fact, it's employees, because we're going to do a context in here, dot employees. And again, we'll do, whoops, sorry. We'll do a dot order by. With a dot to list. All right. Now we're getting the error because we're not returning anything. And we can just return the view. All right. And so again, what we're doing is we're running a query that's going to go through and it's going to grab all of the employees for us. and then it'll order those employees based on the first name. All right. So that's all we're doing right here. We also, like I said, need to create a post. And in that post, we will again want to be able to add an employee. But again, where this is going to be showing us, then with the post rather, that's going to be what we're doing basically after we attempt to add the employee. So this will be a post. I don't know what's wrong with me. It'll be of a post. It'll be a public iAction result. It'll be an ad again, but this time it'll be with the employee. Like that. All right. Now, when you think about it, this is where we're going to have to start making our checks. All right. So we will come in and we will be basically validating. We'll call a check employee. Then we'll call a check employee match. All right. And if basically after we do that stuff, it's possible we're going to throw an error in our model state. But if there is no error, all right, then we're going to add the employee. All right. So now it's not recognizing this. So I think we're going to need that using statement. There it is. All right. So now it's fine. So this is the first time what we're saying here is, hey, if this check failed, we're going to do an add model error. All right. And the reason that I believe it's giving me that is it's model state dot add model error. All right. So again, we are coming through here and we are validating, we are running that check employee. If that fails, there'll be something in the message. So we can go back and we can look back in here under our validations. All right. And in that validate, there's our check employee. Okay. So it will say that that employee is already in the database. So once we've put in everything, remember, we can't have duplicates. So that's what that one is doing right there. All right. But that's only one thing that can happen. So we just set that up, but now we're going to say message equal validate dot check manager employee match. And you may have noticed when I did that one, all right, when I did that one, it immediately started to fill in a bunch of stuff for me. Okay. And actually everything that is filled in is fine. But again, I have to check, same kind of check. If not, string dot is null or empty with our message. And we'll do the same kind of thing. All right. In other words, we're going to throw another model error. So model state dot add model error, name of the employee dot manager ID, and the message. All right. And that's giving me the error because that's is null or empty. So if I'd learned to spell, I'd be much better off. So we have gone in and done 2 checks, and either we have an error or we don't have an error. All right, so that's what we've got to check for next. So if model state dot is valid, and kind of what we've done, if you look at it this way, in the past, so let's say that we put some garbage in there, all right? It wouldn't be caught really until we did the is model dot or model state dot is valid, and it would be being caught because, as an example, we'd be trying to put in a non-numeric value into a numeric field. But now the checks are much more extensive. It could still fail for another reason, but these are the things that we're checking now. All right. And if we had this error, we'll have that add model error. And if we had this error, we'd have that add model error. All right. So if it is valid, we can add the employee. So we'll do a context dot employees dot add that employee. And remember, what that does is that makes it ready to be added. I have likened this in the past to when you go and you do a get add dot and you add everything to the staging area. That's kind of where it is right now. So it would show right now on our screen, but it wouldn't be added to the database until we do the context dot save changes. All right. And now we can use some temp data so we can say that that employee was added. So I'm going to put in here temp data, and we'll put in, temp data. And we will set that up. We'll just call it message. We could call it anything we wanted, but we'll just call it message. It's kind of what we've been doing anyway. And we'll say that is equal to employee dot full name added to database. All right. And then we will do our return with another redirect to action. And we will go back to our index and we will go back to our home. So the index method of the home page. Now, if it didn't work, so if the model state is not valid, we've talked about this kind of thing before. All right. If it does not work, what we want to do is basically we want to return them to where they were, but we want to be able, for lack of better words, to kind of fill in the information or be able to show them. So I'm going to put an else in here. And we're going to put in viewbag.employees equal context.employees. Again, dot order by, like we did before, and order it by first name, dot to list. So that is the employee controller. All right. Now, next we're going to do the sales controller. And I think at least what you're going to find is, again, it's going to be very similar to what we just did. But again, we're working with a different table in the database. So rather than working with the employee table, we'll be working with the sale or sales table, I should say. All right. So let's go in and let's add yet another controller in here. And I'm going to call this one sale controller .cs. All right. And we'll start it off the same exact way we've started off the other ones. Again, whatever way you prefer to do this, as far as if you prefer to use the arrow method or to do it the more old-fashioned way. All right. So now we've got that set up. And again, like we did before, we'll do an I-action index. All right. But I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. So we'll return, redirect to action, and it'll be index, but we want to make sure we're going to the index of the home page. All right. So again, just like before, we're going to have an add and an add method that will have both an HTTP get and it'll have an HTTP post. All right. We're going to do the same types of checks on our sales table that we just did on our employees table. Did I just lose you there for a second?
Sorry, I was trying to adjust something and accidentally refreshed
Oh,
the page.
no. It's
Goes down,
no,
so.
no apologies are necessary. I just want to make sure that you could see everything. I just want to make sure nothing was going wrong. So,
No, everything
okay.
looks good.
Okay. So first, let's do the get. Now, again, this is a sale. So we're assuming since we're adding it, we already know who the employee is. I mean, we'll look for it anyway. But the point is when we're doing an ad, we don't have to provide an ID. All right, because we'll already be getting that. I guess you could actually say we're going to do it right here. And again, we'll just return the view. So that's it for the get routine. And for the post routine, kind of like we just did, we're going to make checks, but we only have one check to make here. Because if you remember, in our validate, we also had a check in here for sales. And that was that the same employee, if we already had him or her, where we had put for them, all right, a year and a quarter and a sales amount, that we can't add it again because, again, this is not that kind of program. All right. So let's add the post. So again, these checks that we're making, these validate, remember they're written and they're inside of the models folder. These are server-side checks we're making for this remote validation that we talked about. Probably won't find it. No, it's not. There is I'm going to put it in here. I want to show you something. So I'm going to actually put it in right. Check sales. And you may know about this already. If you do, I'm sorry if I'm boring you. But there is a shortcut for this. I think, you can put your mouse there and click the down arrow. But I think if you click here, and what is it? Is it like period enter? No, that isn't it. It might be control period enter or something like that. There. I did a control.enter and it added this for me. All right. I don't see exactly what that buys you, but when we get to chapter 12, we're going to be doing a little bit of work with interfaces. And by doing that control dot and hit enter, whatever interface methods you require will be added already for you. All right. So it is a little bit, a little bit of a nicety for lack of better words. All right. So again, this will be our message. All right, and now we're ready to check our model state. Again, we use the temp data just like we did before. All right. That's if it succeeded, and if it failed, well, IntelliSense, depending on your point of view, is a wonderful thing or a terrible thing, but right there, it wrote the rest of it for me. So we have now created 3 of our 4 controllers. Now, this last controller is going to be totally different from what we've done previously. All right, this is going to be the validation controller. And what it is going to do is it's going to make checks just like before. All right, but it's going to return JSON. And it's going to return JSON, JavaScript object notation. All right, and it'll either return JSON true if, for example, our validation worked, or if it didn't, it'll return JSON, but not false. It'll return the message. All right. So let me come in here and do a file, save all, and let's add our last controller in here. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to close that. All right. And we're just going to call this validation controller. Now, one thing about this, and hopefully you've recognized or realized this over time, is that much of the stuff that's done in here is done through convention. In other words, there's just a certain way of doing things. For example, what we've been pretty much doing for most of the semester is we come in, we use NuGet Package Manager, we add our different packages, like entity framework.core or entity framework core, entity framework core.sql server, and entity framework core.tools. We go in, we make our changes to our app settings.json file. We make our changes to our program.cs file. We come in and we write our models. All right. Lately now we've been adding a view model, and here we just added a validation folder. All right. Then we come in and we create our controllers. Then we come in and we work on our views. Now, do we have to do it that way? No. I mean, we could do one controller, then write its view, then another controller, then write its view. But regardless, there's kind of a way that things are done in this particular language by convention. Now, one of the things that you're going to see in the next chapter is it's going to kind of blow what I just said up. And what I mean is, they're going to say, well, this is the way we've always done it. And then they're going to say, but if you'd rather, you can also do it this way. My guess is with most of us, all right, we'll say, you know what, I kind of like the way we've been doing it. But when you think about it, in this chapter, it sort of started because we started to bring in a lot more validation. And in particular, with what you saw in the models validation folder, we brought in custom validation. All right. One of the things that we're going to talk about when we get to chapter 12, all right, is hopefully you remember this from earlier classes, and you may or may not, but I'm going to give some examples. And that is, we talked about different kinds of database relationships. In other words, we've talked about one-to-many, and virtually everything we've done this semester has been a one-to-many relationship, almost everything. All right. But we will also in chapter 12 discover what is special about a one-to-one relationship. All right. There's also one other kind that's a many-to-many relationship. When you write a many-to-many relationship in a language like SQL, like MySQL. So let's say that I had a student table and a teacher table, and I could have many students, could have many different teachers, and many different teachers could have many students. So when you've got a many-to-many like that, typically you create what's called a jump table or a temp table or whatever, where you put a lot of that information into, and you end up putting in the primary keys of each one of the tables. You do a similar thing in SQL Server, but it kind of writes this with a many-to-many relationship. It writes it for you. And all I'm getting to, which is really roundabout the way I'm doing it, but there is a convention for doing things in here, but that convention is typically set up so you're not doing anything out of the norm, so to speak. So you don't want to sit and create your own custom attributes. So you don't want to sit and create your own many-to-many relationships. All right. And that's what we've gotten into here for the first time. All right. Okay. So let's come in here and write this as always. And I'll just call it CTX because we've been doing that all semester. It never hurts to put this in front of it. All right. And I think I've mentioned this even before. In Java, depending on how you program, you typically have the word this in front of a lot of things. And all this means is the current instance of whatever I'm working with. All right. And again, this could have been written just like before. I showed you one other time. All right. We could have written that, and we could have written it with the arrow syntax. All right. We're not going to have in here an index. Okay. We're going to have 3 different JSON methods. Those JSON methods are going to be for us to check our employee, to check our manager, and to check our sales. So this is the controller that's going to work. I don't know why that's there, but this is the controller that will work, for lack of better words, in conjunction with the validation stuff that we put into our model. All right, so let's start. You may or may not have noticed when I just did this, okay, that it's expecting us to do this. Now, we could come in here and don't do this because I'm going to get rid of it. But as an example, all right, we could come in here and create a new employee with first name, last name, and date of birth. That would work. We would not get it's showing an error, but don't worry about it. We wouldn't. But that's not typically how it's done. All right, typically you use the newer syntax, which looks just like this. You can see it's already showing me, and we need DOB equal DOB. All right. Now you don't have to do it that way, but that's considered the newer way of doing it, the cleaner way of doing it. I don't know what else to say. All right. Okay. So we'll have a string here. This will be our message. And again, we are going to now call validate dot check employee. All right. It's giving us that error. So I'll put in here a dot check employee. And I'll try to see if we can use that trick again. And that is, I'll put my mouse here. All right, control dot enter. And as you can see, it put that again in here. All right, so we've got that check employee, and we have to pass to that a context. Oops, sorry. A context and the employee. All right. And again, very similar to the kind of thing we did before. If string dot is null or empty. All right, so if it is empty, then we want to return JSON true. All right, and for lack of better words, that means yes, this passed. The employee that we're attempting to add is not in the database with the same first name, the same last name, and the same date of birth. All right. Now we're getting that error because there is an else here, and that's else return JSON message. All right. Now, one advantage that Grant, that you have, one advantage that Chad has, all right, and Andrew has, as opposed to the, and James, I guess, as opposed to the other two people in the class, those being Lou and Rebecca, is the fact that you have done some work with JSON. Am I right in assuming you did plenty of work with JSON with
Yeah.
Evan last semester?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and they will next semester. All right. And really, again, with JSON, the big advantage of using JSON, not so much in this case, but JSON pretty much can be used with just about any programming language. So when you want to be able to work with different kinds of data, all right, in the past, there's been two different ways of doing it. And if you wanted data to be able to, for lack of better words, kind of communicate between different platforms or different languages or different whatever, all right, in the past, it was done using either XML, the extensible markup language, or JSON. And I'll tell you what, I'm not saying it's never done with XML anymore, But what you find is I would say that it's 90% JSON, if not more. All right, so there's our check employee. Then we're going to write another one for check manager. And that is going to require a manager ID. Again, a first name, a last name, and a date of birth. So let's just put them on two different lines. So we'll have here first name. I'm going to put this, like I said, so it doesn't fly off the page. All right, this is going to work again in a very similar way to what we just looked at. All right, we just did the new employee here, so I can actually bring that in, but we're going to have to make a change. All right, because if I do this, that's incomplete. We have not done anything with the manager ID. Now, since this actually is the employee, the manager technically is not an add-on, but it kind of is. That's typically the way you would do it, is like this. All right. Then just like before, we're going to come in and say string message equals, and this will be another validate dot. All right. And you'll notice now it finds there's the check manager employee match right there. All right. And it knows context and it knows employee. All right. Whoops. Get back. There we go. All right. And again, just like before, if it's null or empty, we're going to return JSON true. Else, we're going to return JSON with a message, that message. All right. And no, it doesn't look like that. Just like that. And I'll leave that up there for a second. And then we've got one more to write, and then it'll be break time. We're already running a little late, but the last one is our check sales. All right. So again, down on the bottom here, we're going to write one more. All right. So the IntelliSense filled that in for us. We got to make our same kind of check. So string message equal validate dot check sales context sale. And if string dot is null or empty, the message, we want to return JSON true. Else, we want to, as it shows right there, return JSON message. But because I like to code this way, I'm going to put it over multiple lines. So that's that one. So we have now gone in and we have written 4 controllers thus far. We wrote a home controller, which had in it an HTTP GET with it for our index and an HTTP POST for our index. Then we wrote an employee controller that had an HTTP GET to add an employee and an HTTP POST to add an employee. Next, we wrote a sales controller, which again had an HTTP GET for adding a sales controller for an HTTP GET for adding a sale and an HTTP POST for adding a sale. Finally, we just finished writing our validation controller, which is kind of tying together the code here with the code that we put in the model. All right. So let's take a break. It is 1:09. Let's take till 1:20, please. We're going to come back. And the next thing that we're going to do is I do a file save all here and close all of these is we're going to go into our underscore layout file under views, and we're going to write that one next. All right, see you at 1:20. All right, it is 1:20, so I'm going to start up. I think we can use most. I'm looking in here. We're going to change this to viewbag.title. Oh, excuse me. All right, so trying to think here. Okay, this is our layout. Yeah, so add viewbag.title. I mean, we could leave in what was in there. It's not really going to hurt. We can leave this, but we have not created our own styles.css. So we really don't need to link that. I'll leave it in there. It doesn't hurt anything, but we don't have our own. This is the one we get by default from the system that does a little bit of overriding what's in Bootstrap, but this is empty. So, I mean, it doesn't hurt to leave it there, but it's not doing anything. All right. So we got this. Let's see. Nav bar. Let's just make this a container as opposed to container fluid so it doesn't go all the way across. Let's see. Yeah, we're using the default. Then we got this. We've got our brand. Span in here. Looks good. Button. Collapse. That looks good. Like I said, I'm just trying to use as much of this as possible. Now, this we're going to change. All right. A little bit. You don't have to do this, but we're not using an area in this one. So I'm just going to remove that. All right. We've got a home index. That's fine. So the controller is home. All right, the action is index and it says home. All right, we have no route ID, but if we did, we could put that in. And, so in other words, we could put this in. All right, that's right, that's right. If we had a route ID, so I'm going to put in here ASP route ID equals none. What that is saying is this is the field we're keying off of. So we're keying off of on home off of the ID, but we're not expecting that there's been anything added into that. All right. Okay, so there's home. All right. And we need this. We'll make another one here. We'll do it the same way. So this won't be home though. This one will be sales. And the action will be add. And this will be add sale. All right. And in fact, the controller's name is sale, not sales. But I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I'm going to just put this over multiple lines so you can see it. And then I'm going to add another one because we also need a thing in there for adding an employee. So it's going to look pretty much the same, except again, that this one will be employee. And this will be employee as well. All right, oops, that was pretty bad. All right, so that is set that up. That's our header. Now, there's what we have to do now is when we get to our basically when we end our header here and we get into our main body section or our main section down here, we have to also account for the fact that we could have that message in there. So we've got our div class equal container, main equal main, etc. That's all fine. But before we have this, we're going to leave that render body, but before it, we're going to add an if statement. That's, whoops, remember it's Razor code, so it's an add if. And we want to say temp data dot keys dot contains message. All right, and it's temp data. That's why I'm getting that error. All right. So if there is a message there, and again, all we're saying is if there is a message, display it. All right. Then we've got our render body. It's not even showing a footer in here, so I'm going to remove the footer. We could leave it in. It sure isn't hurting anything. All right. Now, with what they've got in here, that actually probably in here is fine. All right. I went back and I'm not going to lie to you. I looked at the key to see what the author did here. All right. And they did it like this. I'm not sure exactly why. There wasn't given any explanation, but they took all or both of these out of here. And I think because we're not using any of it, but rather than an await, they put in here an at render section scripts required false. I don't think personally, it's probably not going to matter whether you leave it the way it is or you put it this way. I don't think at least it's going to matter. Now, as you know, as I've proven all semester, I can be wrong. All right. All right. So we've come to the point where now it is time to come in and write our three different view files. All right, so let me do a file save on here. All right. Now, one thing we can do is we can come in here and go to build solution. And I'm looking here, why? Because I just want to see if there were any errors. And it says over here, well, there's a line where I missed a semicolon. Okay. And it says there that this add employee, not everything returns. Okay, so if this, boom, boom, if this, if else. So it looks like I might be missing a return statement. And I'm going to go back into my employee controller and just take a quick look and make sure I didn't screw anything up there. All right. So I'm going back in here. And again, it's saying not everything in this add method for our post is returning a value. So let's look. String message, if this, model state, fine, message, fine, model state, and this is both doing an add. All right. Oh, it's right here. There's no return view right here. All right. So go into your home controller and make sure down at the very bottom in that last else statement, we return a view. All right. And now this is on me, but one thing I find when I'm keying in this stuff is probably a better way to do it, as I mentioned to you earlier, would be, for example, to write a single controller, then go in and write your layout and then write the view files for that controller, because then you can test that one, make sure it all works, then do your next controller, etc. I haven't done it like that all semester. Maybe that would be a better way of doing it. I don't know. So you can see right now, again, we're down to like about 10 of these null reference things. All right. We can look at those later or just leave them. I think I'm probably just going to leave them. So I'm going to do a save all, and I'm going to close all this stuff that I have open. I like to just take a quick look before we go on. Oops, need that. I want to take a quick look and just make sure that in our view imports, that it has brought in everything we've needed. Yep. Quarterly sales app models, and then our tag helpers, which brings in everything. So that should be fine. And in our view start, it should just say layout. All right. Now, one thing to realize, I'm getting off target here a little, or going off on a tangent a little bit here, but I want to just say it quickly. Please make sure those of you who have, I think everybody has probably turned in their test already. But if for some reason you haven't for the Chapter 4 test and you're having problems, please remember for Hot 4 that when you've got an area, that view start shouldn't say layout equals underscore layout. If you made an admin layout, it should be layout equals underscore admin layout. All right, at least one person had contacted me for something that was an unrelated issue. But that's one thing I noticed, and I think that I let them know in an email, hey, you're not going to be calling that layout file unless you put that in there, that it's, in the view start in your areas section. Okay. So let's come in here with our views. Again, the only thing that we have in here right now is home. So you might as well do that one first. All right. And inside of home, we don't need a privacy. We got rid of that. So I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm going to bring up the home. The home index right here, which is all garbage, as you know. All right. So I'm just going to get rid of it all. All right. And we'll start with our at model, sales list view model. Add a little bit of razor code to add the title. We don't, yeah. ViewBag dot title, whoops. And we'll just call this quarterly sales. I think that's what they told us to call it. I don't even remember. And let's start, we'll make an H3 here. And we'll do our at viewbag dot title. That should bring it in from having set it up before. I spell bag right. All right. Now, when we do this, again, we're going to be doing next in here, we're going to be doing the employee drop down. All right. But we're going to want to be able to filter this. All right. In other words, when we set this thing up, all right, we want to be able to pick whatever employee we want to pick, for lack of better words. And that wasn't probably put that well. All right. Okay. So we're going to come in here and write a form. All right. And we're going to put a form in here, and following the form, we're going to put in a table. Okay. Move this over a little bit. All right. I have no idea if you're able to keep up with me or not. So let me know when you're done, and then we'll put in the table.
I'm ready to go.
Great. Now, technically, we don't need this in here. We can just say table, but we might as well give it, we can give it a border, we can give it striped, but you know what? This is so simple. All right. With what they showed in the book, I'm going to try to, I put it in mine. I don't know if it helped or hurt, to be honest with you. So I'm going to take it out for now. that. That should just be, this should just be sale. There we go. Here we're writing an actual query. We're telling it to sum all of the amounts. All right, that's everything. That is the entire index.cshtml. So again, please let me know when you're done.
Okay, I think I'm ready.
All right, well, I'm going to try this now. I'm going to try running it. Now it's not complete yet, but I don't think I'm going to get an error. Still says it's loading.
Mine's still spinning too, but I have an error that popped up.
Okay. Well, what we could have done, probably should have done, is basically just come in and put nothing in there than other than, like, for example, like that H3 tag that we put in there. And all it would had to have said then was, you know, home or something like that. Then we could have done it for the other ones too. Yeah, I don't know what the problem is. Okay, it's coming over here. So it doesn't like what's in our home controller. So let's take a quick look at that. All right. And it doesn't like this line, this iQueryable line that's in here. Queryables. That should be sales, I believe, but I'm not positive. Let's check. Nope. Should be sale. All right. Context dot sales. include S employee, order by S year. Now, when I first did this, and I've changed it in what I've done here with you, and maybe I shouldn't have, all right? When I first did this, and I don't know if I did it unknowingly or what, but I actually called that sales, not sale, but sales. Normally, you're not asked to do that. You're asked not to do that, to make it singular. So when you make the table, it'll be pluralized. But I made it sales, and I'm looking, and that's, as far as I can tell off of my master, that's the only difference. All right. When we get done, we'll go back and take a look at this. I promise. But I'm looking at the code, and the code actually looks correct. All right. I don't think if I go a sale here, I don't think it's going to work. Yeah. Because this is telling it to go through the sales table. That's telling it to go through the database. This, all right, is basically the result that we're getting back. And since it's a single sale, that's why I made it singular. All right, but I'll go back and look when we get all done. I just want to write the other two. I want to write the add methods for these two things. All right, because they're both fairly extensive. They're both, I don't know, around 70 to 90 lines long each. But then we're done and we'll take a look at it. If for some reason we have a problem, I'm going to guarantee you this right now, that I'll have it fixed by tomorrow and I'll show it to you. But I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to get into chapter 12 today. All right, and do about the first half of chapter 12. But we will, I'll take some time when we get done today and we will have it fixed. All right. Just looking at it, nothing looks like it should be wrong to me. All right, but we'll see. All right, so we just did the index. All right, so the next thing that we have to do is we have to come in here and we need an employee folder under views. So I'm just going to close everything else that's open in here. So in views, I'm going to come in, right mouse click, add a new folder, and it'll be called employee. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to add another new folder under views that's called sale. All right, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Try that again. Cancel. So I'm adding two folders here. Again, one is called employee. I'm sorry. One is called employee. One is called sale. Both of them need to have an add.cshtml in them because that's what we put in the controllers. So let's close all this. Come into employee right here. Right mouse click, add a view. That view will be called, it's an empty view. It'll be sale.cshtml. Again, that's garbage in here, so let's just start writing. All right. And then I'm going to copy this. Because the next one is jQuery validation unobtrusive. Not in caps, Jeff. All right. And then on the end, it's also unobtrusive right here. Now, technically, it shouldn't really matter where we put this. All right. We've gone through the discussion before in other classes, perhaps in here as well. Maybe you did last semester. I don't know. But where to put the JavaScript. All right. And I just put it right here on top. It's not exactly the same as like when you're working in a pure JavaScript program or a pure HTML program where you can put it at the top and you usually say async after it, or you say defer, or you put it on the bottom right before the body tag. Well, we don't have a body tag, so I just put it on top. All right. Okay. So under this, again, we'll have an H3 tag. Now we have put in there again of title. So I'm going to say at viewbag dot title to try to bring that in from up above right here. And then I'm going to start writing. Now this whole thing here is going to be a big 4. All right. Now I screwed up in that we're in sales, right? All right. We're in sales. We are not in employees, so we're not going to add an employee here. We're going to add a sale. Sorry about that. All right, everything else is just fine that we've got in here. Nothing else will change. We're still going to come in and we're still going to write a big long form. Okay. It doesn't like this. He just, oh, that's got to change too. That better go from employee to sale. Sorry about that. So make sure you change this. All right. Because accidentally what I'd done is I'd brought up the one for employee. So add model sale and make sure that it says add sale there. That'll get rid of it.
Mr. Scott, should this
Yes.
be in the sale folder of
Yes.
views? Okay.
Oh, you're right. Thank you. All right. So you know what? I shouldn't have, in employee, we shouldn't have put in something called sale. All right. So let's just remove the file and start over and we'll do it correctly. All right. So I'm going to delete the whole file. It's gone. Now, under employee, thank you so much, sir. So under employee, what we're going to put in here is our add.cshtml. So add a view, a form view empty, and it will be add.cshtml. All right. Again, we'll get rid of the garbage. At model, employee, view bag dot title equal add employee. Put it in H3 with our at view bag dot title. All right. That should all now be correct. Okay. Let's start writing our form and do it correctly. Thank you so much for pointing that out. All right. Form ASP action. All right, so this, for lack of better words, is kind of the template that we're going to use here. So right under first name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this one and I'm going to put in last name. All right, so I'm going to do a bit of copy and pasting here, not to screw up anything, and hopefully I won't, but because there's a lot of similarity there. So after first name, I'm putting in last name. I'm not worried about it. That's going to all go away in a bit. All right, so there's my first name. There's my last name. The next field then is the date of birth, but there really isn't much we have to do with that. So I'm again going to just copy. And paste, and then start making some changes. birth. So there's the date of birth. And next we have date of hire, which is going to be set up again, virtually identical to date of birth. So I'm going to grab everything we just did here for date of birth, copy it to the clipboard, paste it in. And I think we call this date of hire. All right, the next one will require a little bit more work because it's got a select in it, but that's going to be the stuff in there for the manager. All right. Actually, the manager ID. And then after that, we just have to put in our buttons for submit and cancel. All right. Leave that there. All right. Something is goofed up here, so let's fix it. Select list. View bag.employees. Employee ID, full name. That looks good. That is everything. Now, it's a little bit early, but I'm going to give you a break now. And the reason I'm going to is I want to look through where we had the error when we ran the program and see if I can fix that during the break. So it's 2:05. Let's take till 2:20 and hopefully I can figure it out. But if I can, then we'll talk about it and hopefully put this one to rest. And then we're going to start on chapter 12, which is how to use EF Core. So I will see you in 15 minutes. Are you back, Grant? All right, it's 2:20, so I'm going to continue on. Now, I made a stupid error. Notice sale and sales. That's what the error is. Now, so please go back to your models folder and your sale.cs model. Now, I want to show you. Let's say for whatever reason, I wanted to use this. I know it's sale, but I wanted to say sales ID. Let's say I want to do that. I could come in there then and do this, and it would work just fine. All right. But what I'm going to do is change it to the way it should have been. So I'm going to change this from sales ID to sale ID. Now, that will necessitate, of course, me redoing the database. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I'm going to come into my tools, new get package manager console. And right now, did I ever even migrate this? I'm looking for a migration and I don't even see a migration folder. Okay, well, that's fine. Then let's see if we can do it now. So let me clear this. Let me do an add migration and I'll call this initial setup. Well, that's good. It's got my data and stuff in it, so that's good. So let's try and update database. As always, no red, no yellow is a good thing. So that's good. Let's clear that. I'm going to minimize that pretty much. Move that over. Go over to my SQL Server Object Explorer and refresh and see if under my databases, I now do have, what did we call this? I don't remember now. Quarterly sales. There's quarterly sales. Under the tables, there is my employees table. So I'm going to quick look, view the data. There's my employees. And remember, Ada Lovelace did not have a manager, so that's set to 0. And I'm also going to check my sales. All right, now whenever I've done this, I've always gone in and looked at the data, but you can, if you want to, you can view the designer as well and see how this was set up. It's even, you can even come in here. Let's say, well, these allow nulls. I wanted to allow nulls. Let's just say for date of birth. You can come in here and check that. I don't ever recommend this. All right. It's one thing to look at the data when you're done. It's another thing to be conceivably changing things both using C# and ASP.NET and changing things using SQL Server. I would never recommend doing that. So now that I've done all this, I'm going to come in and just do a rebuild solution. I don't think I even have to, but I'm going to anyway. And it looks like it came back. So I'm going to try to run it now and see if it runs. May still get an error. I don't know. Well, that looks good. All right. All. Ada Lovelace has no sales. Grace Hopper has some sales. Katherine Johnson has some sales. Well, that's good. And I can put in all, and that should be everybody then. Good. So that's a good start. All right. Let's see if we can add a sale. All right. In fact, let's do this. Let's try to do something illegal. So I'm going to try to add a sale for Katherine Johnson, 2019 Q4. Well, there you go. It says that it did not find an ad. Did we not write that? I thought we did. We did not write under sales. I thought we did. So under home, there's our index. Under employee, there's add. And that one is employee. Well, geez Louise, I thought we wrote one under sale. Isn't that what we were doing right before the break?
We started on that one, but it was in the employee folder, so we
Gotcha.
changed that
Gotcha.
to
So let's
employee.
do that one then. All right. Let's do that one. The good news is so far everything looks like it's working. All right. That's good news. So under sale, let's add an empty razor view. And again, that will be called add.cshtml. All right. Make sure it's in the right place. And, so there's home, index, employee add, sale add. All right. Then let's write that one. Just syncing this up with what I had done earlier. So, okay. All right. Move this over and move this down, and then we'll get going. All right. that same section scripts we just did. So I'm going to grab that from here. I just did that. Okay, maybe not. I don't even know. I don't know where I am here. So let's just do it. All right, class equal. I changed the room today that I normally broadcast out of, and I shouldn't have. There's just been too many distractions. That's all on me. It was just a foolish thing to do, and it won't be done again. All right, so after quarter, we have year and we have amount. And year and amount are going to be very similar. So again, I'm going to come down here and copy, and then we will put in the employee ID. That will not be the same, so we won't copy that one. So the first one was quarter, and the next one is year. And the next one is amount. All right. And that means that we have left two things. We have the employee ID, which again will be a drop down. And we have we will have the buttons. Okay. And once we're done with that, then hopefully at least then we are done. All right. What are you doing here? Why did you put this in like this? I don't know. That should have ended the label there. So good. Golly. And what doesn't it like here for label? Label is before equal employee ID. Equal. Okay, this should say col SM2, and it's not a form control, it's a form label. Still doesn't like something, so let's see. Close tag on the label. There you go. All right. That. That should be it. So if I went too fast, let me know. If you need me to show you anything, and if you're caught up, please let me know that as well.
I actually had an error that I was hoping I could look at one thing.
In the file we're in?
No, it was when we ran it before, it was let's see. It was in the index.cshtml in the home view
Alrighty,
folder.
then let's bring that up. Do
And
you
it was
know?
just a select list. Mine looks the same.
Hmm. So you're talking about in here?
Yeah.
Nothing is misspelled. You're not missing a paren here.
I don't think so.
What's the error?
Let's see, I'm starting it up now.
All right, well, you do that.
Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Is that null reference exception?
And is it saying what when you dig into the error? Is it saying what that is a null reference?
I
Can you
don't.
can you take a quick screenshot of the error that you currently have and
Yeah,
save
sure.
it to a JPEG or a ping and send it to me, and we'll take a look at it right now. And while
Sure.
you're doing that, I want to see if it works. All right, same thing we got before, but now if we add a sale, well, that looks good. I'm going to go back to home and I'm going to try to do something illegal. So 2019 Q4 for Catherine Johnson. So Q4 2019. It doesn't matter the amount, but for Catherine Johnson, this should give me an error. System threading tasks. Good gravy. Well, it didn't take it, and that's a good thing. Let's see if we can add an employee. Well, that isn't doing anything, and I've still got that error. You run it again. Oh. Ooh, that's full name. That's wrong. Could be what was doing that. See if I can add an employee. There we go. So I'm going to try to add myself. Days 10/17, we'll say 2000 in my dreams. Hire date. That wouldn't make, well, yeah, we could say that. 1/1/2020. And manager will be Ada Lovelace. All right, I'm getting this. I've never seen that before. So I'm going to have to look that up. The good news is, if you'd call it that, I guess, it says employee Jeff Scott was added to the database. All right, if I go back to all, let's refresh. But it's not showing me in there. If I filter now, I am there. Well, that's a little weird. All right, did you send that to me?
Yes.
All right, can you check something for me? And that is, can you go back into where you've got your employee model, the employee.cs file?
Okay.
All right. I want to make sure I'm having you bring up the right one. So models, employee. All right. Down on the bottom here, did you call this full name with a lowercase or an uppercase N?
Oh, I've got uppercase.
Yeah, then you've got to use, all yours have got to be uppercase. See, that's what I just did in mine and I got to check now. They just have to be consistent. That's all. But like I said, I'm getting an error that I've never seen before. Not even flagging it as an error. See, it's got me in here, but it's not showing it. It's got this. I've never seen this before. I don't think that's actually an error. I think that's just like a warning message. Let's see if I can add a sale. 3/2019. Well, this says that someplace in here I should be doing an await, and I'm not. Did you run yours?
Yeah, mine's opening now. It's definitely got some errors, like it wasn't adding the sale for me or anything, but it's at least running now.
All right, let's do this. All right, because I don't want to spin my wheels or have you spin yours. I promise you, as soon as we're done today, I'm going to take a look at this, all right, and see what, if anything, I screwed up on. But what I'd like to do is just change gears for now and jump into chapter 12. And when you look at this, I think I said this before. Chapter 12 is kind of broken into two different areas: how to create a database from code and how to work with relationships. That's all theory based. Then they go through this bookstore example, and that's most of the rest of the chapter. All right. And that incorporates a lot of the stuff that they went over earlier in the chapter. So what I'd like to do is to go through about the first 20 pages here, get to 468, and that'll bring us somewhere around 315 or so. And that'll be it for today. And then I'm going to go look at this, see if I can find my error. We'll start with that tomorrow, and then we'll go through the rest of the chapter. All right. Now, just so you know, too, I believe at least, and I'm going to check on this right now, and then we're going to start right up. But let's see. By look in File Explorer, and you should have this. So C:, Muroc. All right. You don't have to do this now, but eventually look under your student download book apps. Oh, it's chapter. I thought it was book apps. Maybe it's not. Let me look. Let me look on the solutions here. It's not that. It must be chapter 13. I don't know. There should be some files. I'm not seeing them right now. There should be some download files so you don't have to put in all the seed data. All right. I'll have to look for that too. So I've got it marked in my book someplace where that stuff should be. So let's just jump into this. Now, some of this will not be, you'll look at it like we already went over this. Yes, we did. All right. So Entity Framework Core is also known as an ORM. And basically, it is a way that allows you to either start with classes, model classes, turn them into a database, all right, and use your entity context as kind of a bridge between them. Or, I mean, that's what we've been doing all semester, which has been code first. But the other way that you can do this is that you can start with a database and have Entity Framework Core generate the classes for you. All right. It's more common, as it says here, to code your classes first along with your database context, and then perform your migration and your update. All right. It says that's what you'll learn about now. Well, that's what we've been doing all semester. All right. There really isn't anything new in there as far as that goes. Now, what they call entity classes, those are, as it says, those are the classes that you create typically under a models folder, and those become your tables. All right. Again, nothing really new in there. All right. Says after you create your entity classes, really before you run a migration, you need to code a DB context class. Again, the context class is kind of a conduit or a bridge between your C# code, all right, and your database. And you know that because when you do perform the migration and you look at the up method, basically what it's doing is the C# equivalent of you going in and creating those model classes. All right. And again, I don't think that anything I'm really saying in here is all that much new. You also have to go into the program.cs file and add that builder thing in there to use SQL Server. All right. To enable your context class to work, you need to add dbset with the entity. What's going to change starting in this chapter and you will change it for your project as well. If you remember when we did the last test, all right, hot number 4, which for some of you, I don't know, maybe it was a nightmare. I don't know. But once we had all those products, for example, in there, the actual file that we had that did our seed data, our or our context file, byte context, I think it was called, was pretty big. It was about 800 or 900 lines. Well, you don't have to do that. In other words, what you can do is you can take each one, or however you want to set it up. But for example, we had, I think, 6 tables. We could have made 6 different class files, each class file containing just the seed data for that particular class, or what would become our table. Then we would add a reference to each one of those in our DB context file. That the advantage of that is twofold. First of all, it does separate everything out, so it's easier to see, especially if you have an error. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is it doesn't really clutter up your DB context file. All right. Now, the DB context file, and we've been working with the on model creating all semester. As it says, there's also an on configuring in there. All right. It says it configures the context itself. It says you can put your connection string there. We've never done that, but it's another thing that can be done. All right. And if we look on the figure on the next page here, we've done this, but we've never done this. All right. As it says, your DB context would go in there. All right. It's another way of doing it. And I'm not saying that the way we did it is the best way, or I'm not saying that this way is the best way. It's just 2 different sides of the same coin, so to speak. I'm going to continue to do it the way we've been doing it. The on model creating, as they mentioned on the bottom of this page here, configures the entity classes. Okay. So basically what you're doing in there is you are setting up directly by putting the information in there, or indirectly by putting the information in other class files, your seed data. All right. Now what they're going to use in here, all right, what they're going to use in here is quite simply, as you can see right now, all right, is they're using a book entity class and an author entity class, and they're keeping them simple. In other words, each book has an ID, a title, and a price. Each author has an author ID, a first name, and a last name. There's probably, when you think about it, a lot of information. For instance, we have nothing about a publisher. We have nothing about a number of pages. We have nothing about a date published, etc. So there's a lot of stuff that could be added here. But for now, at least, this is what it is. In other words, this is the way that it's set up. Now, another thing that's in here, we maybe have done this, maybe we haven't, I don't remember, but you can come in here. We could say public double price gets set, and then we could say equals 0.0. I've done a lot of reading on this stuff this semester, and you see a lot of people who do this. All right. And like we've got the string empty, like we pretty often have been doing, but they also do their numeric fields. In fact, typically, other than their ID field, they typically initialize every other field that's in there. Everybody's different in the way they do it. And usually what I have found is the higher up you can set something, for example, to nullable. All right. The higher up you do that, then typically the less warnings you get as you go down the line. All right. All right. Then here's our context file. Okay. And you'll notice in this example, code that configures the DB set entity. So they're not even showing that in there. All right. But again, there's nothing new here in that. We come in here. All right. we create the constructor, which has got that DB, the name of our context, our DB context options, the name of our context file, options, and then saying if there are any options, they'll be handled by the parent. Excuse me. And we've got that this whole thing inherits from DB context. You'll notice in here, I mentioned this before, this is the first time they're doing this, is when they are setting up their DB set, they are initializing it to null. That can lead to less errors. What I have found, I tried doing this earlier, and when I did, I would guess, I did it on, I had a thing with 3 DB sets in it. And I put the first one in, no problem. I put the next one in, no problem. Put the next one in, gave me a warning. Now, notice it's not just null, it's null with an exclamation point. Kind of an absolute null, for lack of better words. All right. So, as it says, the entity classes define the data structure for the app. The context class inherits the DB context class and includes our entity classes. All right. The on configuring, as it says, can be used for the connection string, but as they mentioned, normally you do that in your program.cs file. That's not even true. We do it in our app settings.json file. All right, that's where we have configured the context. Unless what they're saying there is configuring the context is having that use SQL server and builder. In that case, they're correct. All right. Then the on model creating, again, as it says, it allows you to configure your entity classes. One of the things you can do, as they mentioned there, is to provide seed data. All right. So how to configure the database? We already mentioned this. It says you can configure your entity classes in 3 ways. Part of this is new. It says first, you can configure them by convention. Second, you can configure them with data attributes. And third, you can configure them using code. All right. As it says here, when you configure by convention, you code your classes following established conventions, and the entity framework kind of takes over. For example, if you code a property named ID or the name of the table followed by ID, entity framework treats it as the primary key. It also makes it an identity column, meaning that it'll start at 1 and automatically increment as you add new rows. Other conventions, as it says, string properties create columns. You may or may not realize it by default. Those are of size n varchar max, which basically means they can be as big as you want them to be. It's not an issue. All right. That's one of the reasons when we talked about string length in the previous chapter that was in there. All right. Then it says values like int and double create columns that do not allow null values. But sometimes by making those things nullable, they still won't allow them, but it can, again, minimize the number of warnings you get lower or later in the program. All right. So it says the first one shows how to do this by convention. So if we look here, and we'll go back and forth here. All right. This, if you look right here, it's kind of the example that I gave you before when I screwed up and made it sales ID instead of sale ID. If you decide for a book, you don't want book ID, you want ISBN, you can put the word key there. By putting in the word key there, that signifies that whatever follows is automatically going to be your primary key. All right. And again, that's not really and truly, that's not a bad idea. All right. In this case, because when you think about it, now IDs are supposed to be unintelligible, which means that if somebody finds an ID out of something, all right, that they shouldn't be able to do anything with it. What this grew out of this idea of unintelligible is for years, what people did was they made social security numbers primary keys. They made them strings. They didn't put the dashes in most of the time. All right. But the problem with that is probably what you've already figured out. And that is, what if somebody finds that primary key that should not? Then they've got, if they can put a name with that, they've got a name and a social security number. So that's why the idea was make everything just ID. That said, if I find out the ISBN for a book, it's not really that big a thing anymore. You know what I'm saying? It's, if I know the ISBN for our book, for example, so what? It's not going to hurt anything. So even though that's not an unintelligible field, all right, even though it's not, it's considered basically to be okay to do something like that. And to me, if I knew the ISBN of something, that would make a lot more sense than knowing, for example, out of 40 books, it's book number 37, as an example. All right, so that's what we've been doing so far as the default way. All right, then notice here, you can use fluent API methods for configuration. What does that mean? That literally means that rather than I'm setting the stuff up the way we've been doing it, you write code to do it. There are built-in methods for doing some of the things that we have done, such as, all right, we've done things, I just showed you key, you know what required is, you know what string length is. But notice in here how this looks different. So this says we've got an entity named book, and it has a property in it that's called title. That property is required. That property has a max length of 200 characters. All right. And so what we're doing is more symbolic. It's more similar to what happens in the up method when you do a migration. Now, you look at this and you go, okay, great. Why would you ever want to use this? All right. I would just answer it to you this way. Imagine for a second that we had a textbook, not the one we have, but a different textbook. All right. And that different textbook showed you the way of doing this. And from the get-go, they had you use fluent API methods. All right. Then you might come to what we're doing now like this and go, wow, this is easier. I'd like to use this. Or you might say, and I really understand it doing it this way. So all I'm telling you is it's just another way of doing something. All right. So what they mention in here is they say, you can do it by convention. Then they say you can break conventions with some of the attributes, like that key attribute, or you can use this fluent API. All right. All right. How to manage the configuration files. Again, when you look at this, all right, if we look in here, what do we have? Well, this is our on model creating. We've looked at this before. Now, if we've got something like this, and you've got a couple records in it, it's no big thing to go in and actually put that data right into your context file. It's not a big thing. So if we had book context and we had a couple books and we had a couple authors, it wouldn't be a big thing at all. However, here's another way that you can do it. Notice separate configuration class. So we're creating another file. Notice that that file is going to be called book config in this case. So if we had books and authors, you could have a book config and an author config as examples. Now, when you do this, it inherits from entity type configuration. All right. And you have to give it, in this case, it's book. So you have to give it the model that you're using. It does make a lot of sense. Book config, book. If I had author config, author. All right. But again, this is another way of doing it. So what we're doing here is we are putting all of the information that we would typically put in our on model creating, we're putting it into a configure method, and now it's in its own method. So now notice how that changes in here. Now in on model creating, this is back in our context file. You can see how much cleaner it is. All right. What I am going to at least attempt to do in the example that we are going to create in a couple weeks is to do it this way. All right. So you get exposed to doing it this way as well. And when you create your own version of this little e-commerce store that we're going to create, when you create your own version, I'm going to ask that you do it like this as well. All right. And again, if you say, well, why? It's for the same reasons I mentioned earlier. It cleans up your context file and it takes all like data and puts it into one file. So we might have one file, for example, for books, one for book data, one file for author data, one file for publisher data, etc. And especially if we're doing a very big database that has hundreds of books, hundreds of authors, etc., dozens, let's say, of publishers, that can really, if you don't do that, then your context file can get massive. All right. Okay. Entity framework commands for working with a database. Some of these you've seen already. All right. You know what an ad migration is. You know that as well as I do. Now, one thing that, just so you know this, I watched a guy do a presentation and he came in and said, I don't feel like doing an ad migration. So he just came in here and literally removed every file. Then he removed the folder. I don't think that's a clean way of doing things. I think if you've got a command that's been set up for you to remove migrations, that you should use it. Evidently, not everybody agrees. And again, it's okay. I'm not saying what he did was wrong. I'm just saying if we got a command that's going to remove it anyway, why manually remove it? Why not run the command? So the first three that are in here, we've used. The next one should make sense. The drop database. Now, that's probably one I should have used, but what I've been doing has been coming in here, finding the database, right mouse clicking on it and choosing delete. What they've shown there is a much cleaner and better way of doing it. Not only that, this, since you're running it from the package manager, should run like that without any problems. But that said, running it the way I just showed you by right mouse clicking and then choosing to delete, if that database is currently open or being used, you're going to get a warning or an error message. Now, typically, even though you get the warning or the error message, if you refresh again, the database will be removed. All right. So, and then finally, there's script migration. Notice generates an SQL script based on the migration file or files. So if you wanted to basically make sure you were running the same script every time and maybe just change the title or whatever, you could do that. I've not even used that. Finally, as it says, scaffold.db context generates DB context and entity classes from an existing database. See figure 1214. In other words, this is if you were going to be doing the database first, this is what you could use. So you'd create your database, you'd create your tables. The advantage of doing it that way is some people are very comfortable using the, like if I come in here and do this and I view the data, there are people who are very comfortable coming in here and, well, I guess I don't want to bring up the migration history, but they're very comfortable They're database people. So I could go in and add another record right now in here just like this, and it wouldn't hurt anything. I wouldn't have to do an add migration. I wouldn't have to do diddly. But sometimes you get people who are database people. Sometimes you get people who are code people. All right. It's actually fairly rare that you get someone like the people in your class that are both. All right. But it's just another way that it can be done. All right. When you do the add migration, notice says add migration dash name, says this is required. Well, that's not really said very well, because we do an add dash migration, then just give it a name. So that dash name is what comes after the add hyphen migration. The output directory, all right, if you wanted to put it into a different directory, you could. I don't see the need for doing that, but again, there could be a need for doing that. For the update database command, again, as it says, you can put in the name of the migration file. Notice that the default is the last migration. So in other words, if you don't put anything in, and we have not been, it runs the update database on the last migration file, the one you just did the add migration for. Now, I have written migration scripts before, but I'll be honest with you, I have not done them with SQL Server. I've done them with Oracle, and I've done them with MySQL. But all it's saying in here is if you're going to be running script migrations, there are parameters you can add to get additional information created for you. All right. The only thing I'd say about what's in here, you know about up and downs. There's nothing new here. You know what the console is for the package manager, the PMC. So there's nothing new there. All right. Now, the first time you run the add migration, it creates a file named the name of your context, snapshot. As it says, it's a snapshot of the current database schema. It automatically gets updated when you do a new migration. All right. It doesn't always automatically get removed when you do a remove migration. All right. A lot of times it'll stay there. That is one that if I want to make sure I'm starting with a clean slate, I have removed that one manually already. Okay. So how to use these commands. These are just some examples. I'm not going to run through them. I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but when you look at this, I think you know how to do everything in here that's being shown. Now, again, with the add migration, they show you how you can generate a different, give it a name, etc. But the actual stuff that's in here, so to speak, you've done all this. All right. You know how to, you may or may not have ever had reason to remove a migration. This is kind of neat, but it's very scary. It says to revert all changes, enter that command. What does that mean? When you do an update database 0, that basically is going to, it's going to remove the database and virtually everything that you've done with the database, not your code, but it'll remove, it's almost the equivalent of me going in to the file that had the database on it, removing everything that's in it. All right. You can remove all migration files if you want to. All right. It says when you run these commands, you might get a warning to update your tools. We've never had that because we're always adding Entity Framework Core, but ours has been version 7 or 7 point something. But when this was written, that was the newest version. All right. All right. Now with relationships, I'm just going to show an example. I may have shown something similar to this before. I may not have. I don't know. But I'm going to do this. So I'm going to quickly write a thing in here. I'm going to write as an example, employee ID, first name, last name. I want to keep talking. I'll just put it in here. All right, when you look there, we've got somewhere around 10 fields. All right, and nothing surprising there. So what if I want to add more stuff? In other words, what if I want to add in here hire date? All right, the department that the person works for, the manager of the person, maybe their job title, maybe their salary, and maybe even something like earned vacation. All right. Well, you may or may not be able to tell, but when we look at this stuff up to about right here is all personal information. All right. The reason I'm telling you this is quite often what's going to happen is we're going to take this and we're going to break it up into two different tables. All right. Now, the reason I'm telling you this and the reason it's important is the relationship between these two tables is 1-to-1. The relationship that we've been using all semester in this class has been 1-to-many. For instance, one book can have many authors. All right, many authors can write one book. Well, this would assume almost that every book had only one author. Every book has one author. Every one author has one book. Well, what I'm telling you is when you've got a one-to-one relationship like this, what it typically means is you had one table, but the table was getting so expansive in size that you decided to break it up into two or more tables. Or you had one table that had personal information about the employee and another table that had job information about an employee. So you decided to break it up. Now, you'll notice I put employee ID in here, and you might say, well, that's not personal information. Yeah, but now we can join these together because there is a field in common. All right. Now, the other thing is, so that basically what I just showed you right there, that is a one-to-one relationship. What we've been doing has been stuff like this. Whoops, let's try that again. What we've been doing in here all semester has been stuff like this. All right, I'm gonna just kind of use the author's example here. So I'm gonna have in here book ID, book title, book price. And I'm gonna even add a couple more fields. We don't have to do that, but I'm going to anyway. I'm gonna put in book publisher, book pages, so how many pages are in it, and book, we'll call it published date. All right. All right, now I'm going to create another table over here. All right, and I'm going to call it author. Now, you already know this, all right, but you might say, well, can't you just come in here now and say book author? And the answer is yes and no. The answer is yes if there's only one author. But if there's multiple authors, either I've got to make multiple ones of these or I don't include this. So for now, I'm not going to include it. All right, I'm going to put in here author ID, author first name, author last name, and we'll put in here author. Again, we have a problem. I want to put in here author book title. Well, many authors have written multiple books. So I'd have to have one of these for each book. So how do I get around this? Technically, when you look at this example right here, again, I'm saying technically, there's nothing in common between these two tables. All right, you say, no, that isn't, yeah. What I'm saying is they don't have a common field. All right. So typically then what you do is you make a new table that's called a join or a jump table. And so if this one here, come up to the top here, and I'm going to say that this is called employee. All right. We'll call this employee personal. And down here, we're going to call this one employee professional. I wouldn't normally make these in uppercase, but I just want them to stand out. And then here, I'm going to call this book. We'll call it books. That's fine. And we'll call this authors. All right. Then when you make this jump table, you would typically call it books, authors, and it would have in there both primary keys. You can put other fields in there as well if you want to or need to do so. But what I'm trying to get across to you is this would be a many to many relationship. One book can have many authors, all right? Many books can have many authors. Many authors can write one book, many authors can write many books. So we're creating this jump table or join table here so that we are able to join these two tables together. All right, to combine their information. So if somebody asked, hey, I want the first name and last name, of every author and the books they've written, I can now use this to do that. All right. Then the other thing is basically the one that we've been using. And that's a one to many relationship. All right. Now, why did I take the time to show you that? Because I'm going to show you this is the way that it's done in many languages, for example, like MySQL. It's not the way exactly that it's done in SQL Server. So that's what I want to show you. All right. So they mentioned in here on the next page, there's a one-to-many relationship. And you'll notice that the reason that a one-to-many relationship works is you take the primary key of the one side and you add it to the many side as a foreign key. That's what we've been doing. We've been basically doing that all semester long. All right. Then there's a one-to-one relationship. Now, the author brings up something here that it's in here someplace that I didn't really talk about. Why is there another reason that you might want to make a one-to-one? Well, as an example, if you had a field, they're using author bio here, and maybe that bio field is literally hundreds of characters long, thousands of characters long. Well, then you could sit there and have, all of the author information in one table, except for the bio information you'd put in another table, where again, you could conceivably make that one table. You've made it multiple tables. That's a one-to-one. All right. And the many to many is what I just showed you. Now, a couple things about this. Notice two attributes that can be used to configure relationships. We have used foreign keys. We have created them. We have not used the words foreign key. But what you do in SQL Server is you bring that field in to one of your models, which again becomes your table, but it's not the primary key. All right. That inverse property that's in there, those are those navigation properties that we have been using. So for instance, if I went in and brought into book, if I went in there and I brought author in there and I said author, get set, that would be an example of an inverse or a navigation property. All right. Again, you can do this stuff using the Fluent API, meaning you're writing it with code. Now, I guess if I had written this book, I would have probably shown this method, even though it's harder. I would have probably shown this one first. All right. And had people to understand it and then done an easier way. And the only thing I can liken this to, because I remember it must have been second or third grade. I don't know about you, but for me, that's many years ago. We're talking about 60 years ago. But I can remember distinctly. I think it was fourth grade now that I think about it. So I must have been about 8, 9, 10, something like that. But I remember the teacher teaching us long division and getting it, suffering through it, but getting it, and then having her show us short division. And I remember asking the teacher, you know, um, why did we learn long division? I don't understand because I'm never going to use it. And at first, her reply was, you learn long division because it makes short division easier to understand, which I didn't agree with. And I kind of told her that. Well, this fourth grade teacher that I had, Mrs. Dimmick, no joke, she had my two older brothers and she had my younger brother, and she retired right before my sister was going to go into fourth grade. And she just shook her head, I remember, and she said, typical Scott, basically always questioning everything. But all I'm saying is, I don't think you're probably, if you can help it, would ever want to use this. So sometimes, unless you're forced to do something, all right, you don't ever do it. Plus, what this does by using the Fluent API is it shows you, in my opinion, for whatever that is or is not worth, how much easier it is, to do it non-fluent by using convention. All right, so that's enough of my going on. All right, let's finish this up so we can, so configuring a one-to-many is what we've been doing. Again, notice in here, again, they've come in and they've set these equal to null. All right. Now, when you look down here, this is how you would do it with the Fluent API stuff. All right. In fact, what they're saying here is if you want to be sure, for lack of better words. All right. So initialize a navigation property in the constructor. So this what? This is book. This is genre. But in genre here, you're saying our genre is going to hold a hash set of books. What the heck is a hash set? A hash set is a list, but unlike a regular C# list, a hash set cannot have duplicates. So this would say genre holds a list of books and each book that's in there is unique. All right. Then they come in with the I collection. So this is how they come in and do the navigation property. So again, this is using more the, basically this is coming in and saying, hey, you can use the Fluent API stuff. All right. All right. Configuring a one-to-one. What you'll notice if you look in here, it's done differently than what I showed you. Notice public int author ID, public int author bio ID. But what you do to show their one-on-one is you bring in public author bio. So you bring the whole thing in and you bring the whole thing in. So each one of them contains the ability to access anything in either table. That's how you configure a one-to-one. All right. You can also do it again using the Fluent API. Has one, with one, etc. All right. And finally, the last one that's in here is how to configure a many-to-many relationship. And again, this is done differently in SQL Server than the way that I showed you. All right. You come in here and notice by convention, you come in and you say, hey, this is a collection. All right. So what do we have in your book? Has a collection, which means that it can have one or more authors. And notice it's referred to as a skip nav property. Not really sure why it's called skip nav. I guess that what it does is internally it's skipping some of the steps that it would normally run through. All right. But when we look at this example, I believe when we go through this book example that we'll do starting tomorrow, all right, that they'll go through some of this. All right, let's finish this up. Just a couple more pages. How to see data in a many-to-many. Again, looks a little weird. Why? Because we've got IDs and IDs. And you're going to see this stuff again starting tomorrow. The last thing, mention the last 2 pages in here, how to control delete behavior. What this is the following. Imagine that I've got a database and that database has genres in it. Each genre, let's say, has approximately 50 books in it. What happens if you decide to delete a genre? What happens to the books that are under that genre? And it's up to you. Typically, by default, what's going to happen is what's known as a cascading delete will take effect. And what that means is if you delete the parents, the kids are deleted as well. So in other words, if I would delete a genre, it would automatically delete all the books in that genre. That's not typically what you want to have happen. So typically what you want to do instead is you want to set it up so that if you attempt to delete what would be considered a parent and that parent has children, you'd throw an exception, all right, to let them know, hey, you may not want to do this because of this reason. When you cascade, as it says, it'll delete the children automatically. Set null will now set the dependent rule to null. Says it's only possible when the foreign key is nullable. That's scary. That would be like saying you've got a bunch of books that don't have a genre. All right. And restrict, make sure that it doesn't happen. As it says, this is EF Core's default behavior for foreign keys that are nullable. And that's it. All right. So tomorrow, we're going to pick it up right here. First, and I'm going to do it right now, I'm going to go through my entire working copy of this quarterly sales app, find out where I might have screwed up. We'll pick it up there tomorrow. As soon as we're done, we're jumping right in, and we're going to write this bookstore database thing together. All right. With that said, thanks as always, Grant, for sticking around. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.